Welcome to my kitchen. Today we're going to be making turkey and sausage meatballs. It's a little bit healthier than the regular version of meatballs because I'll be using ground turkey instead of ground beef. We'll also be using some Italian sausage, hot and mild, and that will punch up the flavor quite a bit. Okay, we're going to get started with some onions, using the sweet onions. And we want to make sure that we get our pieces cut nice and small, no bigger than about 1/8 of an inch. They're going to go directly in with the ground meat, and we want them to make sure that they cook fully in the oven. So we want them smaller. Like I said, this is a sweet onion. I just find that they're so much nicer. The flavor is milder, and it doesn't make you cry when you cut them, but it's a mellow flavor. It's a mellow onion, not a harsh onion flavor. Okay, once we get everything cut up, you can then go back and run your knife through the whole pile of onions just to make sure that everything is small enough. Rather have it too small than too big. You don't want to get a big piece of raw onion when you're eating your meatballs. And since everything will be cooking in the oven, you want them small enough, like I said. So, and that'll be a cup of onions. We'll get those in the bowl. And we'll get that all in the bowl. And then the next thing we'll move on to is our pepper. Now I had a piece of orange pepper already started, so I figured I'd use that. If you'd like to use red pepper or yellow, or even the green peppers, you can use those too. And we want these cut up the same size as the onions. Like I said, they're going to cook in the oven and you want them to get nice and soft, so the smaller they are, the better. Cut it in strips and then cut the strips down into 1/8 inch pieces. And that'll be about 1/2 cup of peppers. And just like the onions, you want to run your knife through the pile one more time just to make sure everything's broken up in the right size. I know it sounds tedious, but this part really isn't an important step. You want everything to cook evenly, and you want to have your meatball have a really nice texture to it, and that's what this does. Make sure everything's the right size. So we're going to get this measured and get that in the bowl. And once that's in the bowl, we're going to move on to our parsley. And the parsley's been washed and cleaned, which is important. There's nothing that'll ruin a dish more than some sand in there from your fresh herbs not being clean. So you want to make sure that they're nice and clean before you start to use them. And you want the parsley chopped up rather fine. I find that in this instance, having it smaller pieces gives you the flavor and doesn't change the texture. You want them not big pieces so it gets chewy. You want little pieces so you're just getting the flavor from the parsley. Okay, once the parsley is all cut up, we're going to get that into the bowl too. And that's 1/4 cup of finely chopped fresh parsley. And like I said, that will help with keeping the texture of the meatballs nice and consistent. Okay, let's get the board wiped up a little bit. And then we're going to move on to our eggs. And that's 1 egg for every pound of meat. No matter what kind of meat you're using, you want 1 egg for every pound. So that'll be 4 pounds because we have 2 pounds of the turkey, the ground turkey, and 1 pound each of the hot sausage and the mild sausage. So we'll get our 4 eggs in there. And I use extra large eggs. they seem to be right in between, so the extra large works for just about every recipe. And then next we're going to do a little salt and pepper. And that will be to flavor what's in the bowl right now. That'll flavor our onions and our pepper, and the eggs. You flavor things in steps. You don't put it all in at once. I find that it helps keep your flavors consistent where you don't have too much salt. And when you do it that way, it makes things taste a little bit nicer. Get salt and pepper in, and then we're going to put some Italian seasoning in. And that's 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning. And that was a half a teaspoon of salt and a half a teaspoon of pepper. And I've also decided to use granulated garlic in this recipe. Just because I wanted just a hint of garlic. I didn't want real strong garlic, and sometimes the fresh can overpower. So I decided to use the granulated garlic, and that's a teaspoon of that. And then we're going to mix it up with the fork. And we wanted to keep it nice and light. We want to get a little air in there because that'll help with the meatballs. It'll help them stay nice and fluffy. So we'll get that mixed up with the fork. Really mix it good too. You want to try to get as much air in those eggs as possible. And then next is the breadcrumbs. And that ends up to be 1/4 cup for every pound. So we'll have a cup of breadcrumbs. And then we'll get that mixed up. And this mixture should not be runny at all. If you find that it's a little bit too runny, you might want to add some more breadcrumbs. But you don't want it real loose and runny. It can be moist, but not loose at all. So next we're going to go on to the sausage. And I bought the loose sausage. You can buy the links and take the casing off the links and cut that up if you'd like. This just was what was on sale, so I got this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it up into smaller pieces, because when it comes time to mixing it, it will make it easier and you won't have to mix as much. What makes your meatballs tough is if you mix them too much, so we don't want to do that. So if we cut this up in pieces and separate it really well before we even start mixing, it stops the need to mix too much. I'm just going to go through and cut it up, and then you can break up those pieces into smaller pieces. I'm just going to drop them into the bowl. Okay, once we get all the sausage in, we're going to move on to the turkey. And that is 2 pounds of ground turkey. And we're going to get that in the bowl. I'm going to just put it on top of the bowl, and then we're going to salt and pepper again. And salt and pepper right on the turkey because it is a milder flavor. It does need a little extra help with some salt and pepper. And that's what I was saying before about salt and peppering in stages. So before we salt and peppered the peppers and the onions and gave those flavor. And then once we get the turkey in, we will do that to the turkey. Okay, now, once you start mixing, this is another place where you want to take your time and be careful. And once salt and pepper is in, we can we're going to mix with our hands. They're the best tools that you have in the kitchen. They will help you want to keep lots of air in your mixture. You don't want to pack it down. You don't want to smash it. You want to make sure that it stays light and fluffy so your meatballs, after they're cooked, are still light and fluffy. So what I do is you reach into the bottom of the bowl and pull your mixture from the bottom up on top, and you're sort of folding. And when you push down, you push your fingers down in the meat, and that gets air in there. And that's what's going to help keep them nice and fluffy. And you just keep digging up from the bottom of the bowl and pushing it down to the center. And just keep going. If you come across a piece of sausage that's a little bit too big, you can break that up. But you want to make sure that everything is evenly distributed and you get as much air in there as possible. And also, once it's done mixing, if you want to check for flavor, you can. I've made these many times, so I don't bother to do it, but you can take a little bit and you can cook it off in a frying pan and give it a taste. If you want to put some more spices in, you can. But I found that this ratio works pretty well. And just keep mixing and mixing and mixing. It does take a little while. Okay, once they're all mixed up, I like to bake them in the oven at 350 for about 40 to 50 minutes. You'll want to check them with a meat thermometer. But we put them on a foil-lined sheet. Makes cleanup a little bit easier. And at this point, if you would like to measure them out with a measuring cup, you can do that. I've made so many meatballs, I've gotten pretty good at just eyeballing it. You can make them any size you'd like, which will change the cooking time. So if they're smaller, they won't cook as long. If they're bigger, they'll cook a little bit longer. These meatballs are about an 1.25 inches in diameter. So, and you just go through and you just keep rolling and rolling. And I think we ended up getting, I think it was like 24 on the sheet pan. Yes, and then I also had to have, there was a few extras. They didn't all fit on there, so I got another little tray and I made those and put them in the refrigerator and let them sit in the fridge until they were done, till this tray was done cooking. Or when you think they're done, make sure you check. That's the best way to be safe. The meat thermometer should read 165 degrees because you are using poultry and pork. Make sure you check them as often as you have to. If you have to let them go in for a little bit longer, that's fine. Any leftovers can be stored in the freezer. They're nice to have around. They make a quick lunch or a quick dinner if you need to on the run. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this recipe and I hope you give it a try. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll see you next recipe.